There was a young boy who was afraid of the dark. Every night he would leave the lights on when he went to sleep. After a while, his parents got tired of this and told him that he'd have to grow up. But the boy continued sleeping with the lights on. So, on their way to bed, his parents would come into his room while he was asleep and switch off the lights. This went on for months. One weekend, his parents went away on holiday and they left him home alone for a whole week. That evening, he stayed up late watching a horror movie on TV, but the lights were on, so he didn't get scared. He took out a book and read a scary story in bed, but the lights were on, so he didn't get scared. He went to sleep that night with the lights on, and he didn't get scared. But in the middle of the night, he woke up to find that someone had switched off the lights. That's when he got scared. Billy and his parents had just moved into a new house in the suburbs. Billy was eager to move in and get his own room. He picked the bedroom with the big window that looked out onto the backyard. The family quickly got their stuff moved in and they went to bed. The first night that Billy slept in his room, something very strange happened. In the middle of the night, Billy was awoken by strange moans and screams. They seemed to be coming from outside. Billy shouted for his parents, and a few seconds later they burst into his room. "What's wrong?" asked his father anxiously. "There's something in the backyard," Billy exclaimed. His parents checked and found nothing. They reassured Billy that there was nothing there and they sent him back to bed. The next night, Billy heard the noises again. This time they were louder. Billy got the courage to look outside. As he peeked through the curtains, he saw 3 shadowy figures standing in the backyard. They were glaring back at him with glowing red eyes. The figures seemed to point at him as they moved closer to the window. Billy rushed into his parents' room and woke them up. He told them about the figures outside, but when they got up to look, the figures were nowhere to be seen. His parents told him that he must have been dreaming, and he reluctantly went back to bed. The next night, he heard the noises outside his window again. When he turned over in bed, he was horrified to see a bony, skeletal face staring at him through his window. In one hand, it held a long, sharp knife. It was scratching at the window with its other hand. Trembling with fear, Billy quickly put his hand under the covers. When the scratching finally stopped, Billy jumped out of bed and cautiously peeked out through the curtains. The 3 figures had disappeared. Instead, there were 3 freshly dug holes in the backyard. The next morning, Billy's parents decided to call the police to try to make sense of what happened the night before. The police informed them that a few years before, 3 psychopaths had escaped from the local asylum. They had gone on a rampage, killing anyone they came across and terrorizing the whole town. The previous owner of the house had caught the crazed psychopaths trying to break into his house through the bedroom window. He killed the psychopaths and buried their bodies in the backyard. The police said that the 3 bodies were still buried there. A little girl opened the door to her parents' bedroom in the middle of the night. "Daddy, I had a bad dream," she said. Her father blinked his eyes and sat up in bed, leaning on his elbows. The digital alarm clock glowed red in the darkness. It was 3:33 a.m. "Do you want to climb into bed and tell me about it?" he asked. "No, Daddy," came the reply. The oddness of the situation made him wake up more fully. He could barely make out his daughter's pale form outlined in the light from the doorway. "Why not, sweetie?" he asked. The little girl began to cry. "Because in my dream, when I told you about the dream, the thing wearing Mummy's skin sat up," she whined. For a moment he felt paralyzed, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. Then he felt the covers behind him slowly begin to shift. "We live in the house next door to you. We seem like a normal family. During the day, we go to work, we go to school, we wave hello as we pass you in the street. But at night, when you go to bed, we lock our doors, we close our curtains. we peel off our skin and sit around in our shiny white bones. There once was a man who loved practical jokes. Whenever he played a prank on someone, he would get a great sense of satisfaction from seeing the shocked look on their face. He enjoyed making people scream with fright and almost jump out of their skin in surprise. The man's wife was constantly telling him off. She was tired of his childish pranks and felt he should grow up and behave more responsibly. Nothing she said ever seemed to make the slightest bit of difference, and she generally wound up as the butt of his jokes. As time went by, the man grew bored with the same old practical jokes. His pranks grew more elaborate and daring. He was always looking for ideas for more tricks to play on others. One day, as he was driving to work, he passed by an alleyway beside a large department store. Something caught his eye and he brought the car to a screeching halt. There, laying in the dumpster, was a female mannequin. It was not assembled and the arms and legs were sticking out at odd angles. The man suddenly had a great idea for a prank, so he got out of his car and went over to the dumpster. He reached in and pulled the mannequin's head out of the trash. It was in good shape. Apart from a scratch on the nose and a few other dents, the mannequin looked almost lifelike. Working quickly before anyone spotted him, he gathered the arms and legs and torso and loaded them in the trunk of his car. He spent the day in his office plotting his next great prank. He was so excited he couldn't wait to pull it off. That evening he drove home, ate dinner with his wife and son, then excused himself and went to bed early. The next morning at 6 a.m. his alarm went off. He shut it off quickly so as not to wake his wife and son. The house was completely silent as he quietly crept upstairs and let himself into the garage. Opening the boot of his car, he unloaded the pieces of the mannequin and propped them up against the wall. Then, the man searched through some old boxes and pulled out a dark hooded robe and a demonic face mask. He laid the limbs of the dummy out on the floor and assembled it carefully, screwing the arms and legs into the torso. Finally, he screwed the head on tightly and dressed the mannequin in the dark robe and mask. He proceeded to pick it up and carry it into the house. He made his way upstairs, carefully not making any noise, and opened up his son's bedroom door. In the dim light, he could see his son laying in bed, fast asleep. The man cautiously placed the mannequin beside his son's bed. He took a few steps back to marvel at his mischievous creation. He was pleased, but the mannequin seemed to be lacking something. It wasn't quite as scary as he had imagined it. Just then, it came to him. He crept downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a large steak knife from the drawer. Going back upstairs, he placed the sharp knife in the mannequin's hand and posed its arms as it was bringing the knife down in a stabbing motion. He once again eyed his creation and had to put his hand over his mouth to stop the laughter. He could just see his son's reaction when he woke up and saw the frightening mannequin standing over him, poised to strike. It would be his greatest prank yet. Brimming with anticipation, he tiptoed downstairs and made himself a cup of coffee. Later that morning, the man was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast when his wife came in and said good morning. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table beside him. He had a smug look on his face. His son would be waking up any minute now, and he could hardly wait. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream broke the silence, and his wife dropped her coffee cup. She was about to run up the stairs when she was stopped by her husband's laughter. "What's so funny?" she asked, rather angrily. "It looks like our son has fallen victim to my latest prank," the man chuckled contentedly. His wife rolled her eyes and returned to her chair. They sat in the kitchen waiting for their son to come downstairs, but after 5 minutes of silence, they both grew impatient. "Would you go check on him, please?" asked his wife. "He'll be late for school." So the man smiled and walked upstairs. He opened up his son's door and looked inside. Suddenly, he froze and all color drained from his face. His son lay on his bed. Blood pooled around his shoulders. His throat had been slit from ear to ear. The window was wide open. The curtains fluttered in the breeze. and the robe and mask lay on the floor. The Manikin was nowhere to be seen. One day while my parents were out, I was babysitting my little brother. We were alone in the house and decided to play a game of hide and seek. I closed my eyes and counted to 20 while my brother ran off to hide. When I finished counting, I started looking for my brother. I couldn't find him anywhere. Eventually, I went to my parents' bedroom and noticed that the door of their closet was standing ajar. "I know you're in there," I shouted as I pulled open the door. The bedroom closet was crammed full of clothes, and when I thrust my hand into it, another hand immediately reached out from inside and grabbed me by the wrist. "Come on, I found you," I cried, trying to pull him out. "Come out of there." But he wouldn't come out no matter how hard I pulled. He was hiding behind all the clothes and didn't speak a word. I started wondering what was wrong with him. Just then, I heard a voice behind me ask, "What are you doing?" I turned around and was shocked to see my little brother standing in the doorway of the bedroom. Looking back, I realized the pale white hand was still holding onto my wrist. I screamed out loud and began to panic as I desperately tried to shake myself free of its icy grip. My brother rushed over to help me, and eventually I managed to squirm out of the clutches of that pale white hand. We ran screaming from the room and rushed out of the house. Standing in the street together, trembling, we waited for our parents to return. When they finally came home, we told them what had happened, and they went upstairs to search the bedroom closet. Of course, they found nothing inside, just a bunch of old clothes. One morning at breakfast, my wife seemed very tired. Her face was pale and sweaty. When she reached out to pick up her coffee, I noticed her hand was shaking. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Did you get enough sleep last night?" "I don't know," she replied. "I'm not sure if I was sleeping or if I was awake." "Have you ever had a dream that felt so real that you weren't sure if it was actually a dream?" She paused for a long time before continuing. "Last night I had one of those dreams," she said. "In the dream I woke up in a cold sweat. My heart was racing and I was breathing heavily. I went into the bathroom to get a drink of water, but something didn't feel right. I looked up and saw that the ceiling wasn't there anymore. Instead, it was as I was looking up out of a grave. I could see the edges of the grave above me. There were people gathered around the graveside, but I didn't recognize any of them except for one man. He looked exactly like you. Same eyes, same nose, same face, same everything. He bent over the grave and peered down at me. A broad smile spread across his face and said, 'You've lived long enough. Time to let someone else live for a while.' I went back to the bedroom and I lay down in bed. I can't remember if I lay awake or fell asleep. The next morning when my wife came down for breakfast, she looked even worse. Her hair was disheveled and her brow was dripping with sweat. "I had the same dream again," she said, her voice shaking. She wouldn't say anything more, but as she left for work and kissed me goodbye, I could see the fear in her eyes. I began to get very worried. My wife had always been a calm, relaxed individual. Now it seems as if she was turning into a nervous wreck. Every night for the rest of the week, she had the same dream. Each morning before she left for work, she would tell me about the dream. Her face grew gray. Her eyes became haunted and began looking gaunt and sickly. I decided it was time to have her see a psychologist. However, on Saturday morning, she woke up much later than usual, and when she came down for breakfast, she looked as if the extra sleep had done her some good. She appeared to be healthy and vigorous again. "Did you have that same dream again last night?" I asked. She looked up at me. A broad smile spread across her face, and she said, "What dream?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." This family had moved into an old house that had been vacant for a few years. After they'd been living in the house for a few weeks, they began to smell some strange odor in one of the bedrooms. One night, when they were watching TV, they saw a documentary about a father who had murdered his 13-year-old stepdaughter, chopped her into pieces, and hidden her body parts in the walls of his house. At the end of the documentary, it showed the address of the murder house. It was the house they had moved into. The creepiest thing is that the police found all the girl's body parts, except for her head. One night, an 8-year-old girl was sitting at home watching television with her mother. Suddenly, the screen began to flicker, and the image of a ghostly woman in red appeared on the TV. She was holding a small sign that was covered with words scrawled in red ink. It read, "This is a special announcement. Parents, please send your children to bed immediately." The mother was worried and told her daughter to go to bed. The young girl protested, but the mother remained firm. She grabbed her daughter by the arm and led her into the hallway. The girl meekly walked up the stairs to her bedroom, and the mother returned to the living room. When she looked at the TV again, the woman on the screen was holding a new message. It read, "Please wait." The mother sat patiently on the sofa, waiting for the special announcement. After 5 minutes passed and nothing happened, she began to get bored. Just then, the woman on the screen displayed a new message. The writing was tiny and very difficult to read. The mother inched closer to the television, trying to make out the words. The sign read, "Thank you. Your children are now dead." The mother was horrified. She ran upstairs and burst into her daughter's bedroom. She found the young girl laying in bed with the covers pulled up to her neck, and she breathed a sigh of relief. As she watched her daughter sleeping, the mother noticed that something was wrong. The blankets on the bed were not moving. Her daughter wasn't breathing. Slowly, she walked over to the girl's bedside and pulled up the covers. She recoiled in horror and began screaming. On the pillow lay her daughter's severed head. Her body was nowhere to be found. More than 500 children died that night. The police couldn't trace the strange television broadcast, and the woman holding the sign was never identified. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.